بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So, finally, we are, getting into the first lesson within the building the Islamic mindset. Um, it's going to be a big section. It's going to be in depth, and anybody that has a question, a clarification, something to compare, or for example, if I say something and they have a question, for example, let's say I'm talking about something and they have something in mind to ask, like, is that what you mean? Or this happened with me. Is that applies here? Any clarification is very welcome because before we were talking about things, I'm just telling you this, that, do this, don't do that, and we were talking about that. But right now, we'll talk about concepts, and concepts need to be understood, need to be, understood in depth. And this is what the section is called. It's called Building the Islamic Mindset. So, because it's a mindset, we need to understand any question is allowed, any question is good. And that's how we learn. Okay. Those sections or those lessons might be just a little bit longer than the usual ones because they carry a lot of depth. But feel free. So the first thing, or today's subject, which I want to get in depth in, is heresy versus good innovation. In Arabic, heresy means Buddha. I think a lot of you heard it. Buddha is what it called in Arabic. Against good innovation means a sunnah al-hasana. Sunnah means something that was being done. Hasana means a good thing. Hasana, it's like a good deed called hasana in Arabic. And a good thing is also called hasana. So, what is a heresy and what is a good innovation? Because why this is very important that I put it in this section, building the Islamic mindset, because a lot of people that do not have in-depth knowledge or differentiation between what is a heresy, which is a bad thing, and what is an innovation, that's a good thing, they will mix them up and they will go to their religion and anything a person does that the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, didn't do, they will call it a heresy, which is not sometimes. Sometimes it's a good thing. Okay, so, and the first things first, just before we start, I want to start the section with it. If you want to understand something, get the definition correctly. Definitions, 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 definitions forever. If you want to understand something, then define it a correct definition. Then you will be able to start to compare, you know, because when you define something, you will start getting the characteristics of that thing. When you get the characteristics of that thing, then you can compare it with the other thing which has characteristics, and you would see, is it identical? Is it similar? Is it, not identical and doesn't, you know, look like it at all? With definition and characteristics, you would know what you're talking about. So let's understand what is heresy versus what is a good innovation. A heresy is something that is new to the religion, but it's not only that, but is also um, disapprove the religion. That's what a bad thing is. That's what a heresy is. So, let's say the Prophet Muhammad alayhi used to advise us to give charity, which is a good thing. It's from religion. But he didn't say, for example, that you can buy an area, a small place, in front of the Islamic Center, in front of your shop or whatever, and then just put a water cooler there so that people can drink cool water. So if we're gonna say this is a heresy, it's wrong because it's charity. It doesn't disprove their religion. It's a good thing. What is a bad thing? For example, if you go and as our sheikh says, if you wanna um, do your ablution with water, and we will, we will talk about that later in the next, stages about ablution and things like that. But if you want to go and do your ablution with water and you say, okay, I'm gonna buy some milk and do ablution with it, al-wudu, because it's more expensive. Now, this is a heresy because the religion told you to do it with water and specifically with water. Now you're doing something wrong. For example, if you are praying the, for example, the dhuhr prayer, the afternoon prayer, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that you need to do it 4 rak'ah. And then you would say, okay, because I love Allah so much, I would be doing it 5. Well, it seems that you're doing something good, but it's a heresy. What is not a heresy? A heresy is something that you do that doesn't disapprove the religion, but is your innovation. For example, um, let's say that for whatever situation, instead of you giving your money to a person because he's very young, what you will do is that you will give your money to them, but you will give it for education. Is that still charity or is it a bad thing? It is charity. What's another thing? Like for some reason, I don't have examples in my mind today, but a heresy is something that when you're doing it, you're disapproving the religion. A good innovation is actually was mentioned by the Prophet Muhammad. He said, "Man sanna sunnatan hasanatan fil Islam." Whoever brings for us a new good innovation in Islam, فَلَهُ أَجْرُهَا, then he have its rewards. وَأَجْرُ مَنْ عَمِلَ بِهَا, and the reward of whoever works or doing the same thing, a similar thing like it. إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ, to the day of judgment. Then he says, وَمَنْ سَنَّ سُنَّةً سَيِّئَةً فِي الْإِسْلَامِ, and whoever brings forth for us a bad innovation, فَلَهُ إِثْمُهَا, then he will carry its bad deed, وَإِثْمُ مَنْ عَمِلَ بِهَا, and the bad deed of whoever, does like it because of that person is, created this new bad innovation, إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ, to the day of judgment. So this differentiation, which is a good innovation, a bad innovation, is in Islam. Not everything is a bad innovation. For example, some people, when they talk about when you do dua, okay, doing dua, some people say, okay, the Prophet held his hand like this in a certain shape. Another person came and spread his hand or did whatever, not like that person is talking about. So that person says that's a bad innovation. That's a heresy. It is not. Is that person doing something wrong? No. Is that shape, is that appearance, is a must in Islam? It is not a must in Islam. So then why did the Prophet Muhammad told us that there is a good innovation and a bad innovation, which we call heresy. Because a bad innovation, a heresy, will actually start conflicts with the wisdom of Allah. For example, a bad innovation is that you bring, instead of, um, for example, as I said, people are doing ablution with water. Why it's with water? Because it has some characteristics. Water has characteristics that if we do ablution with it, something happens to our body. Or maybe there is nothing to it. But because Allah said it has to be this way. So if we change it, something wrong would happen, or we would be disobeying Allah. Another example is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that inside of marriage or inside of the relationship, even maybe between, a son and a mother when he's taking care of his mother, and so on and so forth, the man is the one who should be a sustainer, means sustains the female. Now, a bad innovation, which it's happening in this era, where Muslim men actually, stay home and their ladies go to work. That's a bad innovation. That's something not in Islam and actually contradicts with the motives of Islam. So what is a bad heresy? It's not only in worshiping, in rituals. Bad innovation is also when you are contradicting the spirit of Islam. So it has some contradiction with the motives of Islam, the objectives of Islam. So heresy is not only about rituals, it's also about anything regarding the spirits, the objectives of Islam. So when a person says what you're wearing is a heresy, okay, what is the definition of an Islamic cloth, wearings? So we don't have a specific appearance. It has to be this or that. It has three conditions. It shouldn't be very tight to the point that it start describing your part, the invalid parts. So for women is the entire body except for the hands and the face. And for men is from the navel button area down to the knee. So it's not a heresy if you're wearing any clothes that has those three conditions. To not be so tight that it actually reveals those prohibited areas for men versus for women, to cover those areas, and to not be transparent. So maybe you have a clothes, which is the first thing is to cover, but the clothes would be very transparent, or very tight, I'm sorry, to the point that it actually describes the part, or being transparent, so it's not covering at all. If you have those three conditions with any type of clothes, it's not a heresy. It's not something bad. It's not something wrong. Unless one more condition. You're actually wearing something that actually makes you look like a person of a sin. For example, if, for example, gay people wear some type of clothes or some type of jewelry, if you wear those clothes, it's haram because now you are kind of wanting to look like them. If you're wearing some kind of clothes for people, those clothes that actually makes you look like you're from a certain cult, from a certain group, and that group is actually a bad group. They do not obey Allah and they do it on purpose, and they have this as their uniform, kind of. So if you're wearing something like them, then you're actually just trying to brag that I'm wearing like them. I respect them as what they're doing, which is wrong. Some people wouldn't like what I'm saying, but I'm going to say this. If people who are known to be killers and bad people against humanity, and you wear clothes like them, what does that mean? What message does that give to people? The same exact thing here. So, a bad heresy or a bad innovation, which is a heresy, is anything that contradicts with the Islamic religion or the intent and the objectives and the spirit of Islam. Why? Because Islam is here to teach us what is good for us. So, Islam, the spirit of Islam, is for us, is to make us happy. Some things we might not know. Allah knows. Allah knows the future. Allah knows the hidden things. Therefore, sometimes we don't understand some things, which is okay. That's why we have something we call surrendering to God. So, a heresy is a bad innovation that contradicts the Islamic spirit, the Islamic, objectives. A good invention is something with along the lines of Islam by along the lines of Islam by promoting something good, by um, telling people to do good things, or we are doing good things to the point where the Master Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, when they used to mention a person in front of him, he used to smile. He used to be happy. So they told him that person, why when he's mentioned, you're happy? He's a disbeliever, or isn't he? He said that person used to when people come to visit Mecca, he would put very big pots, and he would put meat, and he would put bread, and people would eat. So the Prophet Muhammad is very, very happy with that person, even though he was a disbeliever. So they asked him, they said, is he in heaven? He didn't answer. It's like he's teaching us, he's saying, a good innovation, a good thing is done by a person, we will celebrate that person. Even though he might go to hell, that's not our business. We don't care about this. We care about a person that is doing good in this life. What's in the hereafter? It's for Allah to decide. It's not for us to decide. It's not for us to get into a person's heart. So this teaches us about the spirit of Islam, because who represents the spirit of Islam? If a person wants to learn the spirit of Islam, he wouldn't learn it from me. He wouldn't learn it from that or this. He would learn it from the Prophet of Islam. When you hear the stories about um, Jesus, peace be upon him, what does Jesus represent? He represents the spirit of Islam in his time, which they called the original, then later, Christianity. But all the prophets came in the Islamic religion. That's why we still call it Islam. We don't call it Muhammadian. No, we call it Islam. That's what Allah called the religion since Adam. So Islam is represented by Moses, by Jesus, by Muhammad, by Abraham. Those are the spirit of the religion. So if you want to learn, if you want to feel the religion, look at them from a correct, healthy perspective, healthy eyes, because sometimes people put in the seerah, in the biography of the prophets, from their own mind, from their own feeling. No, just read it abstract. See and feel and try to understand why. So, why I'm bringing those examples? Because the spirit of Islam in this last time, in this last revelation, in the final revelation, is represented by the Prophet Muhammad, alayhi peace, blessings be upon him. And if you look at him, you'll see that The spirit of the Prophet Muhammad is that he celebrates people who does good, even if they're not Muslims. What does that give you? What does that tell you? What does that conveys to you? It conveys to you that the spirit of Islam is the spirit of doing good. Not good if it contradicts Islam. So, for example, what they call it the mercy death or the death of mercy or whatever, you know, that's not from Islam. Why? God knows why. But as long as it's in Islam, you would know that is from the spirit of keeping goodness on this earth. So sometimes we think or we might presume that something is good, but religion came to teach us the things that we don't know. So if the religion does not contradict what you're thinking of, then it's okay. And that's what mubah is. That's what allowed is, because it's okay. But if your thing contradicts the religion, then it's a heresy. So does it mean wearing this clothes, which they are not, they are actually veiling the areas, the prohibited areas, they are not very tight to describe the areas. They're not transparent to describe those prohibited areas, and it's not like a certain bad cult. No. Then just, live your life, move away, whatever you want to do. It's not a heresy. If me, when I am praying to Allah, collecting my hands or spreading my hands, raising them up or lowering them down, does that contradict with Islam? No. Just move away, dude. If me drinking water versus drinking yogurt, I mean, don't this when so this is the thing, which is they think that they know, but they do not know. And that's the huge problem because they don't leave teaching to people who knows and who are authentic in their learning and in their knowledge. Therefore, we see everybody's talking in the religion. And therefore, we see that sometimes they get annoying. Sometimes they get their noses somewheres they shouldn't be. And that's the difference between a person who knows and a person who doesn't knows is that a person who doesn't knows is always finding something, is always complaining about something, is always searching. Just take a break because some things you might think or heard that they are a heresy, but they're not. For example, dogs. Some people hear that dogs are impure. That's in the Shafi'i jurisprudence school. But in the Maliki jurisprudence school, it is not. It is actually pure. So a person who only heard about the Shafi'i school and never studied or listened to anything from the Maliki school, they would come to you. You have a dog? No, this is very bad. This is this and this is that. Dude, you don't have enough knowledge to compare. You don't have enough knowledge to judge. And that's what happens. Now everything becomes a heresy. Everything becomes a bad thing. No, we have a heresy and we have a good innovation. So this is a good introduction. I want you now to ask your questions to compare. Tell me, is this a heresy or a good innovation? I want to have a productive conversation with you. So please go ahead. What's in your life that you saw or a person talked to you about that they told you it's a heresy, but it is actually not, or something along these lines?
I can still remember one time when I had hurt my ankle and I had a boot on, and I went inside the Islamic Center with it on, and some woman got mad and tried to make me leave.
Okay.
So
So
is
you're talking
if
about a situation where your boot actually you got into the boots in the Islamic Center
yeah,
and they wanted just to kick you out.
yeah, it wasn't a shoe, but it was something over my foot.
Gotcha. I mean, if they were gentle, this doesn't have to be with heresy, but if they were gentle, if they understood the spirit of Islam, he would come, he would bring you some kind of, a wrapper, something to wear on top of it, or help you out to get inside. So this actually goes along the lines with what I'm saying about the spirit of the Islam. This person doesn't understand the spirit of Islam. Because even though the mosque or by the way, the Islamic Center is not a mosque. Um, to the point where if a person is actually, if for example, inside of a mosque, if a woman, has her period, she can't access the mosque, but she can access the Islamic Center. It's not a problem. So the Islamic Center is not a mosque, but they don't know about that, by the way. I don't think anybody knows about this. So that's another thing. But even though if it was a mosque, do you know that the Prophet Muhammad alayhi when people would come, for example, from Africa, and he would welcome them in the Prophet's mosque, and then they will start dancing in the mosque. They will start doing their dance, and he will just let them do whatever they're doing. So then, what do we understand from this? What is the spirit of the mosque? I understand from this that the spirit of the mosque in Islam is that the mosque is a place where it should be a welcoming place for people. It's not something that, you know, even if a person, I'm gonna give you another example. A man came to the mosque and he went to a corner and he started peeing. And the entire companions were sitting, and they just stood up and they just wanted to go and beat him. What did the Prophet, which is the spirit of Islam, said? He said, don't scare him. Let him finish his pee and leave him alone. When the man finished his pee, because he just didn't want to intervene or just, disrupt his peeing. He wanted him to be comfortably. When the man finished, the Prophet called him and said, this is not a place for this. And then the Prophet went and brought some water and he started, pouring some water on the pea so that it dilates. So this person you're talking about doesn't understand the spirit of Islam. The spirit of Islam is a spirit of mercy, spirit of love, spirit of um, companionship. And that's one thing. And this is actually why a lot of people call a lot of things a heresy and they're not. So let me tell you something. Um, Let me give you examples about heresy, of what they actually say that it is heresy and is not. For example, the tasbih beads, the masbah, the counter, the mentioning counter, which we use, rather it was made of beads or just the electronical counter. They say it's heresy because the Prophet didn't do it, the Prophet didn't use it. It is not. What's a heresy about it? They say the Prophet didn't use it. Well, it's okay, but is it prohibited? No, it is not. Does it contradict any principle or anything in Islam? No, it is not. Does it actually help you when mentioning Allah? Yes, it does. So it's not a heresy, it's a good invention. What's another thing? Another thing, for example, um, digital Quran. Is digital Quran or reading the Quran from the phone or from the computer is a heresy? No, it's not. It is a helping thing to the point where digital Quran, you can touch it and hold it because you can hold your phone. It is not the paper. You can hold the digital Quran in your hand even if you're not, having your ablution. Even if you blow your ablution, you're not, you don't have your wudu. You can hold the digital Quran while you cannot hold the actual Quran. So is it a heresy or a good innovation? It is a good innovation. Okay, what about the celebration of the Maulid? Is a heresy or is a good innovation? Let's see it. Let's define it. What is the Maulid? What do you do in the Maulid? Well, you read from the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. It's a good thing. You gather as companions, as brothers and sister Muslims. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. You read Quran. That's a good thing. You distribute food. That's a good thing. That's something Allah actually mentions in the Quran that encourages people to feed other people. We start um, complimenting the Prophet Muhammad with songs and music and poetry. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. What is the bad thing? What is the heresy about the Maulid? Nothing bad about it. Oh, but the Prophet Muhammad didn't do it. The companions didn't do it. Okay. Is that a prohibition thing? Is that a prohibition condition if the Prophet didn't do it? And if the companions didn't do it, then it's prohibited? No, it's not. That's what they actually talk about. They say, if the Prophet didn't do it, if the companions didn't do it, then it's a heresy. It's a bad thing. No, it is not. The Prophet came to give us some things specifically, some rulings specifically, and came to give us the spirit of Islam. Came to give us how can we measure and rule and scale things and weigh things. So not everything is a heresy. You need to see, is it a heresy or not? What's another thing that um, a heresy that you heard about? Anybody remembers anything? Um, for example, what? What else? For example, when when people tell you don't um, say Happy New Year for Christians, is that a heresy? It's not. Why? Because what are you telling them? You're telling them Happy New Year. It's a prayer. You're praying for them, you're hoping for them, you're wishing for them to have a happy new year. Well, what is a happy new year? To be happy, to be healthy, maybe to be Muslim, to understand Islam more than those who doesn't understand Islam. You're praying for them. You're not telling them, okay, you worship, Christ, I'm going to be also worshiping Christ. You're not telling them that. You're just hoping, you're wishing for them for a happy new year. For example, music instruments, and that's another one. They say that music instruments are haram. It's a heresy. It's a bad thing. It's prohibited. It is not. Not at all, actually. Because sometimes they bring a hadith, they say that in the end of time or in an area in one of the eras, that people will actually um, make adultery permissible. They will they will actually they will allow adultery, um, silk, what else? Al-hira wal-harir, and al-khamr, alcohol, wal-ma'azif, and music instruments. But this is the thing. Silk is not prohibited for women. So if they prohibit everything in this hadith, then they're talking about, um, making silk also prohibited, which is not. I mean, this is another debate. I can go in it. I actually wrote many, many things about this, but the thing about it is music is prohibited in that situation because the music is promoting adultery and drinking alcohol. It's exactly like saying ships, ships in the sea on water, and and stealing is prohibited. What does that mean? Pirates. Pirates are prohibited. Piracy and being a pirate is prohibited. But ships are not prohibited. But if you are companioning ships with stealing, yes, then it becomes prohibited because you're destroying the spirit of Islam now. The same thing here. Music is not prohibited. And when the Master Muhammad was one day sleeping, and there were little girls playing and playing with musical instruments. So one of the companions came and said, "Don't do that." The Prophet Muhammad said, "Let them do it." Would the Prophet Muhammad actually let them do something prohibited? And this is the entire thing that I'm talking about, is that um, not everything is prohibited because the Prophet didn't do it. And not everything is prohibited because you understood it from a certain text, because sometimes your understanding from that text is prohibited. For example, another thing is when doing certain or reciting certain mentioning while doing movement in some Sufi orders. They say it's prohibited. It's not prohibited. You're moving. Is movement prohibited? No. Is mentioning Allah prohibited? No. They're combining it together so that they will get energy to not sleep, to be able to do more and more. What is prohibition about it? Um, a lot of things, a lot of things. I mean, I didn't make a list, unfortunately, but the list goes on and on. And what I want to tell you here is that heresy is something where um, it actually contradicts Islam or contradicts the spirit of Islam or the objectives of Islam, the intent behind Islam. And we will learn tomorrow, inshallah, what are the objectives of Islam. But we don't have only heresy, we have good innovations too. Things that when we do them, they're not prohibited and they maybe serve a purpose in doing something, even though that the Prophet didn't do it at that time. And what our teacher teaches us is that some people want to live the time of the Prophet, not the spirit of the Prophet. What does that mean? It means some people will want to wear and ride and live in tents and whatever places and areas, the appearances to be exactly or very similar to how the Prophet and the companions used to live, but they're not living the spirit of the Prophet. The spirit of the Prophet telling us, I mean, did the Prophet had concrete and iron enforced homes? The Prophet has glass and windows. The Prophet had computers. The Prophet had electricity. The Prophet had cars. No. But the spirit of the Prophet is teaching us in my time, if I was living there, I would do those. I would have windows because what prohibits them? I would have cars because they make my life easier. I would have this and that, electricity and computers and phones, because it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. The Prophet didn't do them, yes, because he lived his time and we're living our time. That's the wisdom of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's teaching us more. وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, and say, Oh Allah, increase my knowledge. So with increasing the knowledge, we discover new things. We are living new eras. So they want to live the time of the Prophet, not the spirit of the Prophet, and that's a heresy. Because Allah is the one teaching us things, and we are advancing, and that's the problem of many Muslims. They don't care about the bigger picture. They care about so little details. They sniffing their noses in some places. Allah didn't tell them to do that. So heresy versus good innovation, I think very clear now. Do you have guys any questions? I would love to hear it. Do you understand what I explained? Do you have anything to add on top of it? Any questions?
So bad heresy could be in changing anything that rips the fabric of Islam or the idealisms of Islam.
Exactly. Exactly. It will contradict Islam or the spirit of Islam. They will tell you one thing though, those people who we call extremists. Why do we call them extremists? Because they went extremely away from the intent of Islam. They would say a rule that is correct, but they are applying it to the wrong thing. They would say, um, gosh, I'm just forgetting today. They would say something along the lines, and I forgot the exact thing, is that, hold on. Yes, I remember now. They say al-ibadat tawqifiyya. And just want to say, well, I'm just forgetting today. It's okay. Tawqifiyya. Tawqifi means something strict, something need to be done in a certain shape or certain form. So they say worships or things that you do as a worship are need to be done in a certain way or a certain shape, which is correct, but only on things Islam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that they need to be in a certain way. For example, you mention um, you know when you fast the month of Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it in a certain shape, in a certain appearance, and in certain rules. So you cannot say, for example, I'm going to start fasting after, 9 o'clock. No, you need to fast when the sun actually, before, you need to hold from eating food before actually the sun goes up. Yeah, I'm sorry, before the Fajr adhan, before the Fajr calls. And then you would say, okay, but I would break my fast, you know, at the Asr before the sun, sets. You can't do that because now we will tell you al-ibadatu tawqifiyya, that worships are set in stones. That's kind of the literal meaning. You cannot change it. But because Allah told you it's be done this way. The same thing for the morning prayer. It's two rak'ah. You don't do one, you don't do three. The same thing for the dhuhr. It's four. Asr, Maghrib, Isha. The same thing with um, it's the same thing with all the obligatory things. Okay? But for voluntary things, for example, mentioning Allah, is it a heresy to mention Allah with His name, this name, in this number? No, it is not. Is it wrong to pray all night? It is not. Is it wrong to fast after Ramadan or not to fast? No, it is not. So worships are set in or carved in stone or set in stone. It's when Allah told you they need to be done in a certain way. But it doesn't mean, for example, the same exact thing when they said about the Mawlid, the celebration of the Prophet, they say, no, worships are set in stone. You can't do that. Well, yes, I'm not saying I'm gonna pray the Maghrib as 5 rak'ah or 4 rak'ah or 2 rak'ah. I'm praying the Maghrib as 3 rak'ah. I'm celebrating. I'm not touching the obligatory things. I am adding voluntary things. I am reading Quran. I am gathering people on food. I'm doing this and that. And you can measure everything in life on this. So they actually will blackmail you. They will say worships are set in stone, but this means the worships that Allah told you not to do opposite or otherwise. But other things, voluntary, optionary things, you can do whatever you want. But if you want to go and do your ablution for a voluntary prayer, you don't do it with milk because God told you that you do ablution with water. So that's what means worships are set in stone. Means when you do ablution, you don't do it with milk, you do it with water. But do you want to wash your hand one time or three times? It's up to you. So that's exactly what it means. So this is what I want to warn you about is that they will bring a good valid rule, but they will apply it not in its correct place, which is very, very bad. So do you have any questions? No. Okay. We will meet inshallah next week. We will talk about the five major objectives of Islam. This subject we talked about took some time. I don't think the next subject will take much more, than maybe 30 minutes. But if you have any questions, just send me a message or, contact me whenever you want. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Assalamu alaikum.